All right, welcome to the very last lesson on the Age of Absolutism. This is the lesson where we're going to be going into the wars of absolutism. Notice the term I have there where it says the balance of power. This is a term you definitely need to be familiar with because all the wars fought essentially from the 1500s all the way into, you could argue all the way into World War I, into the early 1900s, but definitely through the late 1700s, early 1800s, are known as wars where it's all about trying to break or maintain the balance of power, meaning that if you're the one that you want absolute power over everybody, you're trying to break the balance of power because you want so much control that no one else can challenge you. And then everybody else then teams up against you to maintain the balance of power because they don't want to be overruled by someone. And so that's essentially almost all the wars from the 1500s through the 1700s were fought on this model, this idea of either breaking or maintaining the balance of power in Europe. So there's going to be a few wars we're going to be talking about. There's more wars than just these ones, and at the same time, the wars we're going to talk about are can be broken up into separate wars. I'm not going to get that in depth with this one. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as I can. There's a heck of a lot more stuff to go into on this one, like how these wars affect the whole world and stuff like that. I'll talk about that a little bit, but one thing you do need to know, notes-wise at least for class, is that I don't have anything written up here. All the information on these wars you're going to have to get while listening to the segment. Sorry about that. It's kind of the way it is. It's the way I like to do it in class as well. So, because it's a lot easier to be looking at the maps while I explain things. So you're going to be seeing maps of kind of who's against who here. But the first thing I'd like to show you is the wars that we're going to be going into. Now I'm going to switch this out a little bit. Yeah, that's the right one. The right view I'd like. So, great wars between absolutists. The first war we're going to be talking about, if I get this all right, the first war we're going to be talking about is the 30 Years' War. Now, I actually referenced this war at the very beginning of class when I had you guys here, when I talked about, one of the reasons why we don't wear hats. And this is that war where, you had the mercenaries going around and German people just knew that if people weren't taking their helmets off, get out of town because they're meaning bad stuff. If they knew to take their helmets off, hey, maybe they're going to be nice. So it's one of the reasons why I have the whole hat thing today. So this is that war. We'll be getting into it a bit. If you would, just look at who's against who there. You have the German Protestants, Denmark, Sweden, Prussia, and France. And France is an asterisk. I will explain that. You do need to know why they're an asterisk. Against the German Catholics, Austria, Spain, Portugal, and the Italian states. Now, this war starts, and this needs to go in your notes, by the way, about the 30 Years' War. It starts as a religious war, but is also seen as the first real war of the age of absolutism because of France. France looked at what was going on and saw that the Catholic nations, the German Catholics, Catholic Austria, I should say, Catholic Spain, Catholic Portugal, Catholic Italy, were winning. And if they were going to win this one, they were in a much more precarious state. Now, France is Catholic themselves, but they did not want to see the Habsburgs gain any more power than they need to. So Catholic France, under the leadership of Cardinal Richelieu and King Louis XIII, guys we talked about in the segment on France, they decide to help out the Protestants. So it's the idea where political power is put as more important than religion, which is a big deal at this point because most people put religion first around these times. So, and in this case, they kind of were able to help They fought this one to essentially a bit of a standstill. Neither side really wins. But you need to know that and put that in your notes, that the 30 Years' War started as a religious war, but ends as a war to maintain the balance of power, and a war of the age of absolutism. Now this next war, War of the Spanish Succession. Religion is still in there a little bit, but it kind of goes out the window. This is more just about who can get more power, who can gain power. In this case, this is a war that's actually started by France, by Louis XIV, who we talked about in the French segment as well, who's trying to gain all power. He gets the German state of Bavaria to join him. Spain joins him as well, but that's because he's actually trying to join France and Spain together to become this uber powerful, I just said uber, sorry, this ultra powerful country in Europe. and a bunch of the Italian states that belong to Spain anyways. I put the Italian states on there, yes, but in a way they just come along with Spain, basically. And everybody else in Europe was like, no, we can't have this. We can't let Louis XIV and France get this much power. So they all combine against him. So I'll explain how that works a little bit later, but just notice who's there. Then look at this war and notice who is kind of switching sides. Like, notice people that were fighting against each other in War of Spanish Succession are now fighting with each other in the War of Austrian Succession. Okay. By the way, this is the war that was actually started by Prussia, Frederick the Great of Prussia, picking on Maria Theresa of Austria. And everybody kind of chooses sides there to break or maintain the balance of power. Then you have the 7 Years' War. And again, if take everybody except for France and England and they all just kind of switch sides. This wasn't fought too much. This was fought just like 2 decades after the War of Austrian Succession. And then again, it's all about breaking or maintaining the balance of power. And I'll explain more about that as we look at the maps and things like that as we move on here with each war. So that being said, if you want to keep looking at this, just pause this and do so. We're going to look at the maps now, just everything. Now, I know this is a confusing map, and this is a map leading into hopefully giving an understanding of the kingdoms around during the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. It actually was 30 years, unlike the 100 Years' War between England and France. It was more like 120 some odd years. But anyways, that area in red is known as the Holy Roman Empire, and if you notice, it's really broken up between a lot of different kingdoms. Even like the Kingdom of Austria itself, Austria-Hungary, is like half in, half out. Anyways, just something to point out there. But if you remember back to the unit on the Renaissance, Reformation, Scientific Revolution, during the Reformation we talked about something called the Peace of Augsburg. Peace of Augsburg was something to where Charles V, Habsburg ruler over Austria, at the time, well, half of Europe almost, a third of Europe basically, at the time, his time at least, makes a deal with the German princes saying, hey, you can choose to be Protestant or you can choose to be Catholic. So most of the northern areas there, like Brandenburg, which becomes Prussia later on, when it joins with Prussia off to there to the right, Württemberg and whatnot, they become Protestant. Whereas more of the southern ones, like Bohemia, Austria, Bavaria, they remain Catholic. Now, that's kind of all well and good and stays that way for decades. There's turmoil and tension, yes. But finally, actually in Bohemia, even though the Prince of Bohemia, or the leader of Bohemia, wanted Bohemia to stay Catholic, the major city of Bohemia is a city called Prague. And they didn't want to be Catholic. They were mostly Protestant in there. And they were getting sick and tired of their Catholic leaders. So they one day just decided to kick them out. They kick out the Catholic clergy, and they kick out the Catholic leaders and just kind of say that, nope, Prague is now going to be a Protestant place. That didn't fly under the terms of the Peace of Augsburg, and the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor, Austria, moves in swiftly to put it down. But all the Protestants of the north see this as, wait a minute, if they do this, then they're probably going to do that same thing to us too. And by the way, this is after the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France, when the Catholics did move against the Protestants in France, started killing them, and then it spread everywhere. That fear is there and all over Europe, thinking that once the Catholics move and put down one Protestant area, they're going to get everybody else too. So this massive fear of Catholic retribution is going through all of northern Germany. So they unite together to fight against the Catholics. And all of a sudden you get this massive civil war in what is known as Germany today, but in those German states, the Holy Roman Empire, between Catholics and Protestants. And the Catholics start getting the upper hand. So Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark and Norway, decides to get involved. They come in, they're able to push the Catholics back a little bit, but then they lose a major battle, and it looks like the Protestants again are going to be on the losing side, and the Catholics are going to get the retribution. So in the Kingdom of Sweden, a very Protestant nation now comes down with a very well-trained army. I'm trying to remember the name of the king. Gustav or Gandolfo. Starts with a G. Anyways, he comes down and he beats the Catholic armies over and over and over again. And it looks like the Protestants are going to win until, in one of the final battles, the Protestants under the Swedish leadership win the battle, but the King of Sweden gets killed. Without his leadership, the Protestants start breaking apart, and looks like the Catholics are going to have the upper hand again. Looks like they're going to win this overall. And that's when Catholic France decides, you know what? We don't want the Habsburgs to get any more power. They got Spain, they got Portugal, they got half of Italy under control, they got half of Germany under control. They have all this wealth coming in from the New World. We can't let this happen. We can't allow this to go on. We'll be the next ones to fall, even though we're Catholic. So they actually intervene on the side of the Protestants, and they fight the Habsburg Catholics to a standstill. And that's the 30 Years' War for you. So, by the way, if you're looking at the pictures off to the right, this is the war where you definitely see a huge transition between the old medieval way of fighting to the more modern gunpowder warfare. That is predominant from then on into this day. So, next we have the War of Spanish Succession. I've alluded to this a few times. This is where Louis XIV finally makes his move. You know, he does the whole Versailles thing, kind of tries to get all the nobles addicted to pleasure, tries not everybody to question him that way, builds up his armies, goes into massive debt, hoping that this all plays out and he's able to win this. And he starts this massive war where everybody else combines against him. Now, the reason why this started off is that he was able, through a political marriage, to get it so his nephew, a guy named Philip, I believe, was going to be next in line for the Spanish throne. That Spain would no longer be a Habsburg territory. It was going to become part of the Bourbon family territory. That's a huge switch because Spain is Habsburg. It's traditionally Habsburg. Not at this point. And by the way, the king of Spain today, like in 2020, I don't know his name now. There's Juan Carlos, but he passed away, and someone else is. I need to look this up, dang it. But anyways, it's still the Bourbon family today in Spain at their constitutional monarchy that they have going on today in 2020. So, or year 2020, I should say. Anyways, this is where you get that switch in the wars of the Spanish Succession. Succession meaning who is going to succeed the throne. All of Europe did not want a French guy, Philip, to get on the throne. If France could make sure that a French guy to get on there, it's almost like France and Spain would become one nation, and that would be ultra powerful. And all of a sudden, this really powerful country of France in Europe, this other really powerful country of Spain, along with all the wealth that Spain gets from its world empires in the Americas, its colonies in the Americas, it'll just be too much for everybody else. So they all gang up on them. It's one of those ones where you look at it and you're like, man, Louis should have won this one. He loses the very last battle. It ends up being the most decisive battle. You know, he won most all the other battles leading up to that. But he loses this really crucial battle, and he has to finally go out, make a deal where they say, all right, we'll let Philip, a Bourbon guy, become king of Spain, but France and Spain have to remain separate. Like I can't remember how it works, but some way where France and Spain can never be one country ever again. So it's kind of like Louis XIV got his way a little bit, but not as much as we wanted to, where he could become like the real absolute ruler of the world in a way type thing. But he was still able to get at least a family member on the throne of Spain, so maybe in the future this might be able to come around again. Anyways, but that's the War of the Spanish Succession in the late 1600s, early 1700s. Next major war of the Age of Absolutism is the War of Austrian Succession. And again, when we say succession, we're talking about who is succeeding to the throne. In this case, we're talking about Austria. Through the pragmatic sanction that we talked about in the last video segment on Austria, Prussia, and Russia, Maria Theresa is made the Empress of Austria. You know, girls aren't supposed to be in charge there. And yes, everybody within Austria thinks like, hey, we can take advantage of her, but so does everybody else outside of Austria think, this is our chance. Austria seems like an empire in decline. We can break off pieces. And the guy that's really chomping at the bit to get a part of Austria into his kingdom is Frederick of Prussia. Prussia's a large German kingdom, yes, but it's nowhere near the point of being able to challenge someone like France or Austria. But he's able to get an alliance in place and kind of diplomatically work this whole war against Austria. Maria Theresa does the same thing. When she sees this coming, she's able to get a lot of other people on her side, so you get this massive war. This is, by the way, this is seen as a world war. Look at the picture down at the bottom right. You're seeing all these nations and how they're dividing up, and then you take all the territories that they control in the world at the time. There's fighting all over the world during this war, even though it really starts as a Prussia versus Austria thing. In the end, I can't really say someone's a definite winner and someone's a definite loser. In a way, both sides win and lose in many ways, and especially when you look at it from different countries' point of views. For instance, from the point of view of Prussia, they definitely get a win out of this one because Frederick is able to get the major piece of territory that he really wants. He gets that area called Silesia. And then I show you a picture of Prussia, of how big Prussia becomes after the War of Austrian Succession. That's a huge industrial area. To this day, still a big industrial area. A lot of revenue to be levied from that area. And he's able to take that away from Maria Theresa. Now, Maria Theresa, even though she loses that section of her kingdom, yes, she's seen as a winner because she keeps Austria together. A lot more. They could have lost a lot more, essentially, and she was able to keep things together. Now, there's tons of other winners and losers. What did France get or lose out of this? What did England actually got a lot out of this? England and France. Oh, one thing I forgot to point out when I was showing who's against who, in almost every single war, minus the 30 Years' War, France and England are always against each other. They're always making sure they're on opposite sides of how things goes. England is always trying to make sure that France is beat down. France is always worried about everybody else. England's always worried about France. Anyways, just know that England and France were always at each other's throats in these whole things. And the same thing goes for this next war. In the 7 Years' War, this is the war where basically the European monarchs look at this and say, what did we do in the last war? We allowed Prussia to become a major power in Europe, a major European power. That's not the way it is. That is upsetting the balance of power. So the former allies of Frederick the Great turn on him, like France turns on him. And they want to beat him down. They want to return Prussia back to just being a little German princedom, someone who isn't a major power player. And we're looking at this, it looks like everybody's ganging up on Prussia, and it is. Maria Theresa was so happy about this, by the way, when she was able to get everybody else to kind of gang up on Frederick. It was kind of like, I'm going to get you back. This is a huge vengeful thing for her, by the way. Frederick, he does well in this war, but he's kind of peeing his pants at this point. It's like, oh, crap. Everybody's coming at me. But they're just, yes, Britain joins them, but Britain doesn't really send troops to help them out. They help them with finances a little bit here, but really Britain tries to deal with the Spanish and French fleets off in the Pacific, not Pacific, in the Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean and the colonies. In fact, if you remember your U.S. history classes, the French and Indian War, that's this war. That's just what it's called in the Americas, but that is part of this overall Great War. In fact, I have a map of it, or this part of the map here is over in the upper left-hand corner there, where it's showing the British territories versus the combined French and Spanish territories there. Anyways, so they're doing more over there. Portugal, they just hate Spain, and they have every reason to just kind of get on Spain, so they decide to help out as well, and Britain kind of gets them in there as well. That's not much help. Frederick the Great spends 7 years, well, it was actually more than 7 years, it was longer than 7 years, it was more like 8 or 9 years, I believe, but they call it the 7 Years' War. But he spends this whole time doing what he can to make sure that the Russian, Austrian, and French armies never team up against him. He always tries to take him one-on-one each time, and even when he's taking him one-on-one, he's always outnumbered. But he's able to beat them each and every time. There's a few times where he thought he was just done for. He's like, okay, I've won all these battles, but my army's too ragtag right now. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this, but somehow he's able to just win the next one. He hides out in a swamp for a year or so to kind of stay away from these armies and just play them off of each other. But at the end of this, he ends up winning. When we say he won this war, he won in a way where Prussia remains dominant. They are a major player in European power politics from this point on. They don't gain much more land per se, but they definitely gain the prestige, and everybody has to recognize, yep, they're power players. We don't want to deal with trying to knock these guys out. They're too tough. They're too good. Anyways, and this will play into our next unit when we finally get to talking about Napoleon and the Napoleonic Wars. Anyways, I believe that's the last major war we're going to talk about here, so I'm going to end at this point, and this should end your note packet for the all of Age of Absolutism. So, say at this point, start studying a bit. You'll be taking the quiz in a little while. I'll let you know about that when it comes, but I will see you guys later.